Okay, welcome to Perry's Clocks and Antiques. This is the historic Samuel Shivers house, dated 1669 in Woodstown, New Jersey. This is a precursor to going over to the First Baptist Church in Salem, which we're going to be later on looking at the movement, which is in quite the deplorable state from lack of maintenance, from increased dirt and usage over the years. This is one of my 18th century clockmakers' benches. I work on a movement like this. This is a French movement from the 1770s. And it's very reminiscent of the movement we're going to see over in the First Baptist Church in Salem. And the issues that we have as we spin the movement around, in that movement, from lack of maintenance in the last 50 to 60 years, we essentially have two vertical plates here. You'll have the same on the clock movement. That's called a tower clock. And where the gears come through the plates, the axles come through. These areas on the Salem tower clock are extremely worn. It's not been lubricated in 40 to 50 years. Typical lubrication for that type of tower clock should be every 2 to 3 years. In addition, the Salem clock is in a steeple where you're getting a lot of ambient dirt blowing through. And unfortunately, we've had a local gentleman many years ago come by and spray the entire clock mechanism with lubricant. And when he did, it was like a magnetic force with the dirt coming through the air. So when we look at the movement, the full-size movement coming on, if you'll see the gears and the teeth on the gears, he has sprayed it with a lubricant. They're full of dirt, and when that clock continues to run, you just hear a grinding and a grinding. And what happens is the teeth on the brass gears continually start to break down until they don't mesh anymore. And then I have to rebuild an entire gear or series of gears and pinions. So it's big work, particularly on a tower clock like that, when the items are rather large. So just remember, I'm working on watches here also. So the difference between going into an 18th century pocket watch to this tall case clock movement or enormous, or moving from the tall case clock movement here up into the Salem Baptist tower clock is another major jump. So your machinery needs to be 3 to 4 times bigger and more heavy duty to handle the job, to be able to cut gearing and things of that nature. Okay, welcome to the First Baptist Church in Salem, New Jersey. We're here to take a walk up to the clock tower to take a look at the mechanism, which we're going to be doing a restoration on. This is actually the Fenwick's Colony town clock since 1750 here in Salem. The clock is run into disrepair from about 10 to 15 years ago. It's not been striking. No one knows when the last time it did strike. And it's running very slowly. Unfortunately, the town of Salem, the city council, has disemboweled itself from the project here. They've been funding this project as far as maintenance goes, the movement, the mechanism, the bell, since about 1750. So somewhere around 2010, for what they claim are reasons of church and state, they have backed out of doing any maintenance on this clock, and it's going to go silent because this clock is grinding to a halt at this point. Over the years, it's been lubricated improperly, and we have a lot of ambient dust and dirt that had blown into the mechanism, and its gears were grinding. I shut the movement off last week. So we're here. We're going to take a walk up into the steeple. But just to give a brief history about the clock, town clocks are very, very important in the history of society, going back some 2,500 years of all the important cities in the world, whether it be London, Paris, and even here in Salem. The town clock in Salem, again, started in 1750 at a different location. Fire had taken that down. The bell had fallen. A second location was erected. Again, 100 years later, the clock tower burned. The bell dropped. Each time the bell dropped, it cracked. In 1848, the town erected this church tower behind me, and simultaneously the Baptist church was looking for a new home, and it built its church essentially around the bell tower. So this is actually John Fenwick's town clock of 1750 stands here. It is the same bell. The bell has been recast 4 times as a result of falling and cracking. Take a breath. I think we have about 16 feet of chicken ladder. Okay, we just made our way up the 16 feet of chicken ladder to the first landing, or the bell landing. And right now you're looking at the bell that's been cast 4 times as it's plummeted due to fire. Interestingly enough, the bell at various places has the various casting dates cast into it. So each time they put a different casting date. But as you can see, the bell is not hooked up. It's not been running for a number of years. No one seems to know the last time this bell has worked. But if we can look down here at the pivot and bushing point of the condition it's in, it's quite deplorable. This is a brass and bronze bushing in here. This whole thing is going to have to be disassembled, cleaned, and if it's insufficient, it's going to have to be returned on a lathe and milling machine. And then missing here is our chain and our cable that's going to pull the clapper back and hit the bell. Okay, I think at this point, where this bell is also a manual bell that can be used downstairs at the bottom on the first floor level. But we're going to shut off and we're going to make our feet up another 12 feet up into where the mechanism is. And you can see the chicken ladder there going up to the top. And what we have here is a 1946 E. Howard of Boston mechanism. And it's called a tower clock mechanism, as I said at my clock bench back in the clock studio. This mechanism was actually dropped in the top of the tower when the spire was rebuilt after a hurricane had hit it a number of years ago, about 50 years ago. So the new mechanism came from the top. Traditionally, when you're doing a restoration on a mechanism like this, it is totally disassembled, brought down the ladder, but unfortunately, it will not fit down through any of these openings. So the whole restoration is going to have to occur on the top floor in place. So it's going to be quite the challenge. It's going to be a multitude of times up and down the ladder in the next 2 years with materials and supplies, etc. I think we'll take a walk upstairs now. Let's get a look at that mechanism. Okay, welcome to the steeple of the First Baptist Church, or better known as Fenwick's Town Clock, circa 1750, here in Salem, New Jersey. As we said on the lower level, this clock is not struck in, who knows, 15, 20 years. No one seems to know when. Let's take a look at our surroundings here. We're at a restructured tower that's been restructured probably in the 1940s in the last catastrophe of the tower, which had a hurricane blow the steeple off. And as you can see, we have steel construction was put in place then. It's doing a bit of corrosion, some rust forming. And unfortunately, today and 50 years ago, the contractors that took the steeple off, they just cut it up and let it lay here. And the degradative effects of sawdust and rotting timber has aided and abetting to our mechanism grinding to a halt. In 35 years of being a horologist, I've never seen a mechanism in this deplorable condition. Absolutely a travesty. And again, this is an E. Howard of Boston, custom made in 1948 for this tower. They sent a representative down. But just a word, prior to this, in this exact location in 1902, and I'm sure many of you out there have clocks or have heard of Seth Thomas. Seth Thomas was the most famous known clockmaker in America since the beginning of clockmaking here. Seth Thomas personally walked up this chicken ladder in 1902. He measured this and built himself a tower clock. But that again went down in a fire in 1946. Okay, so we do no longer have the Seth Thomas movements. We have an E. Howard sitting here. E. Howard was in business for over 100 years, and it was the premier tower clock for the last 200 years in America. Unfortunately, we'll get a few close-ups, but you can just see the dirt and grime that's from, number one, from the wood that's been sitting here. And actually, there's ambient air floating through here full of dust. And someone unabashedly came in and they lubricated it, who knows, with oil, WD-40. And it's just chewing and grinding the gears and the chains and levers. And these are counter sprockets here that are just littered with old grease and oil, and they're just magnets for dirt. The first thing we're going to have to do up here, and talking to the care and maintenance individual, is he's going to have to remove and clean up this environment. If we're going to endeavor on getting this mechanism back to new in a full-blown restoration, we need a clean working space. And after we get a clean space, we're going to set up a tent in here of plastic, whether it be out of 2x4s or something else, but we need to keep this mechanism clean. If we're going to put a lot of time and effort into it, we want this restoration to last a good 50 to 100 years. That's the objective here. And it will, absolutely will. And keep in mind that this mechanism will last literally to the end of time if it's properly maintained. And in this process of this restoration of Fenwick's town clock here in Salem, I want to be able to train a young person from the community to come up and learn how to set the time, if any of the time of the 4 dials is out of sync, how to lubricate, and how to maintain this clock. And he can take under my tutelage, he can take this for the next, hopefully, 25, 30, 40 years down the line, and then at that point train someone else. But as we go up to our counter gears here, we can look. These are going to all 4 dials. Again, just riddled with grit. And when I first came up here a few weeks ago, it was just grinding and grinding, so we shut it down. When this mechanism was new in 1946, or let's put it this way, since 1902, the City Council of Salem has been trying to get out of doing the maintenance and taking care of this clock. They bought the clock, bought the bell in 1750, and since around 1902 they tried to get out of it, and they're just trying to cut corners and cut funds. But little did they know, as we spoke down on the street, town clocks like this were very important pillars of the community. It creates an ability and an environment in the community for people to get together, a time to worship, a time to work. And to hear that bell, it's a soothing thing. And to know that we're one of the few communities that have had a town clock. And our town fathers, we should call them fathers, have let this go to such an extent. But nevertheless, here we are. And the first endeavor, as we said, is going to be to clean up the debris. And then this whole mechanism is going to be cleaned, disassembled. There'll be 2 tables set up here with lights, small portable heaters, or if we need to go to air conditioners when it gets hot. The frame here, which is going to be repainted. We have a dial, which is totally peeling and flaking, will be repainted. The motors will be rebuilt, or they will be replaced. Any gears or pinions will be replaced. These are the bushings. These are the places that must be lubricated every 6 months. And as far as we know, they have not been lubricated in 40 and 50 years. So where you have increased wear in these areas, where there's increased wear, there's increased friction. And where there's increased friction, the clock mechanism doesn't keep proper time, it doesn't chime properly. And just another word, that when this E. Howard mechanism was placed here, they lifted it via V crane with the steeple off, put it here, and then they put the steeple on. At the same time, in 1948, no one wanted to pay for this movement after the last fire. So within 24 hours, the mayor at that time put up over half of the money for this mechanism, and they took a pan down Market Street in Salem. And by the end of Sunday, the very next day, this fire occurred at 10 o'clock on Saturday night. The very next day, they had enough money from going door to door. So the people of the community stood up, and no thanks to City Council, because they provided absolutely 0 funds. Up and beyond that, they donated. The people on Broadway came up, and what they did was they took donations, and these 4 beautiful ground glass white dials, going back to 1948, where the monies were donated for them, and the hands were also donated to have the hands custom made, custom filed. Yeah. But the most important thing is the history that this bell has seen. And it's been found in documentation that in 1776, on July 4th, this bell, manually, by hand, was rung for 24 hours straight to declare our independence from Britain. At the end of the Civil War, when Lincoln declared end of the Civil War, this bell was rung by hand 24 hours straight. And at President Lincoln's assassination, the bell was rung 24 hours straight. And when President Kennedy was shot and assassinated, it rang for an hour straight. So it has quite the storied history here in our small community of Salem. So we have gotten together to try and come up with the funds. I'm providing pro bono my skills over the next year to 2 years to get this mechanism back and restored. And we hope to have this ring in a July 4th, either a year or two from now, and have a great celebration here in Salem. And hopefully this is going to be a launch of a community preservation program that we can reclaim our houses, our historic fabric here in Salem, and take it away from the people who are taking it away from us, quite frankly, the politicians. So it's a time we stand up, and this is going to be our bellflower. This is going to be our beacon project here in Salem. Thank you very much for your time.